What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Crew 2, and in this video I'm going to take a look at the Lamborghini Countach LP 5000 versus the recently added Porsche Panamera Turbo S Sport Turismo. So this is definitely going to be a pretty odd mix-up, guys, but I did want to compare these though, because for one, I've been loving the Turbo S so much. I feel like this car is insanely fun to use, and it does kind of give me hope that maybe in the future of like Motorfest and or maybe the Crew 2, basically speaking of Season 9 here, that we might see like a GT2 RS and or maybe like a new GT3, but who knows though, maybe in Motorfest we might see like a 911 Turbo S and or like a GT2, but only time is going to tell on that. But overall though, guys, I have been loving the Panamera. This is actually one of my favorite Porsches in real life as well, which is kind of funny because it does look kind of insane. I do feel like a lot of people would most likely get like a regular 911 Turbo S over this one, mainly because both cars will cost over 200 plus $1,000. So I guess it really is going to come down to which one you guys like more. I would like to know in the comments below, would you guys pick a Panamera Turbo S and or a 911 Turbo S? I do know they're both going to be completely different cars with different engines, but both cars are going to be insane in their own way. But I really would probably pick the Panamera over the 911 Carrera, but I really do think I like having the four doors on the vehicle. But nonetheless, guys, jumping right into this here. So for the Panamera Turbo S, I have been using this car a lot recently over some of the other ones like the Q60 and or something like the Superleggera as well. I have been really enjoying this car, and I figured I would actually go against something like the Countach that was considered like the meta. I do have a feeling that's most likely going to change now slightly, not because of the Panamera, but just in general because that car has been nerfed a bit over time. But nonetheless, guys, this car is going to do around 255 miles per hour, so it is going to be slightly faster than many of the street cars like the Q60 and a lot of the cars like the Celine as well that can do like 230 to around like 240 miles per hour. So at least the Panamera Turbo is actually going to be a bit faster than some of those. And of course, once you do have a higher top speed, you are normally looking for a great handling vehicle. And it does turn out, guys, even though this car is going to be pretty dang big, and even with this car being a tad bigger than something like the Countach and or even like a 911 GT3, I still think this car is still going to be insanely oppressive around corners. And one thing I did notice about this car as well, guys, I'm sure a lot of players do love the engine sound. That 4.0 liter V8 in this Turbo S honestly sounds incredible, and you can actually fly out of corners because of the power this car does have. It is going to be a 7-speed, so you don't have to shift it insanely often, but it's going to be similar to something like the Carrera 4S that's going to be an 8-speed. So if you are using manual, do be prepared to actually shift this car a tad more often. And I do think some players might not be the biggest fan of the Panamera because of that 7-speed, but one way I do look at this, guys, is looking at the Countach. That car is actually going to be a 5-speed, and I would say depending on if you are used to like a 6-speed and or how like the 7-speed is shifting, you're most likely not going to like a 5-speed more than like the Turbo S. So I do find the transmission on this car to be a lot better than the Countach. And I do feel like both cars will probably have advantages and or disadvantages because of their transmissions. For me, I do prefer the Panamera a lot more because you do have to shift it more often, but I do find it a bit easier to fly out of corners and or find a gear a tad faster, mainly because you do have extra ones compared to something like the Countach. But overall, guys, the Panamera Turbo S really is going to be a great car. I have a feeling a lot more players are going to be testing this thing out in the future as well. I really do feel like we were long overdue for this Panamera, so to see this car in the Crew 2 is definitely going to be awesome. But now moving over to the Lamborghini Countach LP 5000, so I would probably say, guys, a lot of players are most likely still running this car to this day. What's kind of funny though is I have been seeing a lot of the leaderboards still covered in the Countach, and what's kind of funny though is I basically haven't used this car in an insanely long time though, pretty much since it has released. I have been running things like the Carrera 4S and or like the Q60, and then now I've basically been running the recently added Panamera Turbo. But The Lamborghini Countach really is going to be insanely good in a lot of ways, but to be honest guys, I'm not the biggest fan of this car. I will explain why here in a minute, but the top speed of this thing is going to also be pretty dang high. I did notice though guys, depending on the road you are on though, it is going to be slightly weird. I did manage to get this car to go 258 miles per hour on the highway near Las Vegas, which I would say is going to be insanely fast because it's around the same as the Superleggera. So the Lamborghini Countach really is going to be an insanely fast vehicle, but the biggest thing about this car though is by far going to be its handling, which I would probably say before for many players is most likely going to be its biggest attribute. And the main reason why I say that is the top speed of this car is going to be good, and it is of course going to be a 5-speed, but most players probably like the handling of this car over the overall speed because for one, if you guys are a manual fan, you may not necessarily like the way the Lamborghini Countach does shift, which honestly guys, you're probably not alone. I do feel like a lot of players are most likely throwing this car into automatic, at least before jumping into a summit, which I really can't blame you. Going around certain turns with this car can be a bit of a nightmare because for one, you might not find the best gear to actually get in around the corner, because I did notice there is going to be a slight delay with how the gears are set up on some of these vehicles. For example guys, with the Lamborghini Countach is going to be similar to a 4-speed. You actually can probably over accelerate on some of the RPMs, so once you guys do actually redline, I did notice some of the cars can go 5 to 10 miles per hour more, and if you guys were to shift early, the car is actually going to lose speed, and this is going to be a big issue around corners because you definitely want that extra power. If you do actually lose some speed when coming out, you might be able to use nitrous, but it's still not going to be the same thing as actually flying out of that corner with more power. I would say the Panamera is going to be a way better option. Now, one thing I also have to admit, guys, I'm not the biggest fan of this car's stability either, so I'm sure a lot of players do find the Countach to be kind of squirrely. If you guys are one of those people, you're definitely not going to be alone because I think the exact same thing. I would easily pick the Panamera over this Lamborghini because of that as well. I'm not the biggest fan of how this car gets very squirrely around certain areas. And if you guys do go around certain turns, the car kind of slides but grips at the same time, which isn't really going to be a bad thing because the Countach really does have great handling. I would probably say it's going to be some of the best in the entire street class, even like top 5 to this day. I really do think the Countach is still most likely going to remain like one of the quote-unquote metas. I, for one, guys, am just not going to run this car that much in the future because I would rather use the Panamera, even though both of these cars are going to have their advantages and or disadvantages compared to each other. I would like to know which car you guys would choose in the comments more and why. For me guys, I would most likely pick the Panamera Turbo S over the Countach. Don't get me wrong guys, I do love the overall look and the performance of the Countach really isn't terrible. I just like the way the Panamera does handle a bit more, which I do think some players are going to agree though that the Countach's handling might not be the greatest compared to some others. Overall though guys, I would again like to know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more insight.